Daily news and analysis. We keep you informed and inspired.
This is World Today.
Hello and welcome to World Today. I'm Ding Hen in Beijing. Coming up, China has named the country's 10 major science breakthroughs in 2025. China protests Japan over a break-in at the Chinese embassy in Tokyo. Ghana's president says the United States is normalizing erasure of Black history. Unitree Robotics is riding on this humanoid tide as the Hangzhou-based Chinese company targets $610 million initial public offering. To listen to this episode again or to catch up on our previous episodes, you can download our podcast by searching World Today. First up, China's National Natural Science Foundation has released a list of the country's 10 major scientific breakthroughs in 2025. The list includes samples collected by China's Chang'e 6 mission, shedding light on the evolution history of the far side of the moon, Chinese surgeons performing the world's first pig-to-human liver transplantation, a Chinese reactor hitting dual 100 million degrees in harnessing nuclear fusion, and the discovery of vibrant communities of marine creatures beneath the deep sea. Other scientific breakthroughs took place in fields such as the diamond film, biotechnology, semiconductors, and solar cells. The National Natural Science Foundation is responsible for the country's primary funding mechanism for basic research. So for more, joining us now on the line is Dr. Zhang Fan from Beijing Normal University. So thank you very much for joining us today, Professor Zhang Fan. Let's begin with the samples collected by the Chang'e 6 mission. What's the significance of learning about the evolution history of the far side of the moon?
Basically, the far side of the moon is very different from the near side. On the near side, you see this, whether it's man in the moon or a rabbit in Chinese mythology, it's basically called lunar mare. It's frozen lava that flown out quite late into the lunar history. That's why there hasn't been so many craters due to asteroids hitting it. There hasn't been enough time for that to happen. On the far side, on the other hand, you don't see these kind of flat regions. So the far side, the crust is older, much older. So this dichotomy in the moon's structure tells you a lot about how the moon was formed. So there's the leading theory that the moon was formed by a protoplanet hitting Earth, and then all the splashed out debris forming the moon. And how that process actually worked in detail, all the information is embedded in those samples that they collected. So the material, the chemistry difference, the vestige of the magnetic field in those samples, those can tell you basically the geological evolution history of the far side of the moon, and compare that to the near side, for which we already had samples from earlier missions. Then you have a fuller picture of how the moon formed. So that's a fundamental question of basically our immediate space environment, how the Earth-Moon system formed in the first place.
Then in terms of a Chinese-led team's discovery of vibrant communities of marine creatures beneath the deep sea, those creatures actually were found to be surviving without any sunlight. Instead, they depend on chemical reactions for energy. What could be the meaning of this discovery?
First of all, that's actually related to the space explorations as well. In some of the future Tianwen missions, China will send probes into the outer solar system to the moons of Jupiter. Those are basically large ice blocks. They're frozen water, and they don't receive too much light from the sun because they're so far away. However, Jupiter is nearby, and its gravity keeps squeezing and squashing those moons of Jupiter. So it injects energy into deep inside the ocean. So the ocean can be sort of a liquid down in the center. In that kind of environment, if you are to expect any sort of biology to happen, it has to be sharing the kind of chemistry that this kind of new discovered life form has sort of deep in the ocean, where its energy source is not from the sun at all. It has its own little ecosystem where things can happen. This kind of a discovery, by learning what's found deep inside the ocean, you can basically learn what kind of things you can expect to when you're looking for life in the outer solar system, and what kind of instrument you need to design. And also the fact that there are quite different mechanisms from the life we know normally means sort of any sort of biology is highly regulated chemistry. That's very the new type of chemistry you discovered. So from that, you can do all sorts of things, sort of design new medicines and stuff like that. So it's a discovery that leads to new discoveries, as they say.
Okay. Then what's the significance of Chinese surgeons performing the world's first, pig to human liver transplant?
Right. So organ transplantation has been a major problem because the shortage of donors and suitable donors, no less, because your immune system would reject sort of this sort of organs that they regard as exterior, as not your own. It's fighting it, and eventually that leads to fatality. So what they did now is by having these pig organs being able to be transplanted into humans, not only solve the supply of organs, so you don't need donors anymore, hopefully in the future. The issue that they managed to sort of modify the gene, the genetics of the pigs, so your human immune system wouldn't attack as much. So in a way, that's not only a replacement of human organs, it may end up being better than a human replacement. So that basically solves one of the major problems that human faces if we want to live longer. Our liver in particular, because some people abuse it by drinking too much and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, interesting to know that. So in addition to those three cases we have talked about so far, what other breakthroughs made in China over the course of last year have caught your attention?
I think those discoveries related to energy generation are quite interesting. So one of them is related to fusion reactors. So basically, in the middle of the sun, when the pressure and temperatures are immense, hydrogen atoms fuse together, and that gives you a huge amount of energy. That's what powers the sun. We're trying to recreate that on Earth, but it's even more difficult because there's no pressure, so the temperature needs to be even higher. If I remember correctly, it's 100 million degrees. So they've done that in one of the Chinese sort of test facilities last year. So that's one of the things that popped up. Another thing is there's this thorium to uranium conversion. So thorium represents a new generation of nuclear reactors that are safe. It wouldn't blow up if external power supply shuts down or something like that. And they can be very small, so they can be used. You can build little reactors using thorium near your data center, for example. So the thorium to uranium conversion gives you not only thorium reactors, but also sort of a fuel for other more traditional reactors. So that's a quite interesting advance.
So some leap forwards are being made in terms of China's research and development for its homegrown civilian nuclear technologies. So, Dr. Zhang Fan, as you look at the fields in which those 10 major scientific breakthroughs were made, what do you think they tell us about the focus of China's scientific work?
So, aside from the Chang'e 6 mission, which is attached to a very sort of high-profile space exploration, all the others are very close to sort of utilization. They're more technology than science,
Okay.
which kind of give you a sense of China's emphasis for the last many decades, really. So China has been concentrating on how to convert sort of basic knowledge into workable, sort of even cost-effective technologies that eventually benefit human beings. So a lot of these huge percentage of this tenor, sort of either medicine or energy generation. There's also solar power as well. So yeah, that really shows you the where the emphasis lies.
Okay, so in other words, China is pretty realistic or pragmatic in terms of the country's approach to scientific research.
Yes, I would say so. So it's very application sort
Okay.
of focused. It's more applied science. Let's put it that way. So applied science. So you have science, knowing how things work, and then you have applied science, where you begin to use that knowledge to begin to manipulate things, to be able to build new things. But at this stage, you don't necessarily have a clear sight of how big a usage you end up having, and then follow on that, there's the engineering step, which makes things affordable, makes things really worthwhile, and can be pushed out, rolled out into the economy. So applied science is receiving a lot of attention right now.
Then what about basic science or basic research? We know in 2025, R&D spending accounted for 2.8% of China's GDP. However, some say the share that is devoted to basic research in China's total R&D spending remains relatively low, and they suggest that China further increase that share and encourage broader participation in basic research from businesses, from universities, and the whole society. What is your take on this?
Yes, I think the encouragement for businesses to climb further up, back up the chain towards more original research, it's certainly useful, and it's happening just in the last year or so. Companies begin to be able to bid on the to put in proposals for research grants that used to be mostly research institutions or universities, and then the academicians, the sort of academic post-academic honors are now sort of offered more to commercial sector as well. So that's certainly useful, because they know what is needed in terms of science and engineering aspect of it. So they focus resources in the correct direction. In terms of the basic science receiving more funding, I'm not sure throwing more money at it is the way to go, because a lot of it is trial and error. It's a spark of inspiration that it's not something you do it at a larger scale, then it gives you results. Like once you already have something, and then the engineering steps tends to be more sort of increase the input, then you get more results. Basic science doesn't work like that. You sort of need to just let people think and dream and do things like seems frivolous. So I'm not in a camp that says basic funding should receive more, but basic research should receive more funding, because when funding comes, comes the audits, comes the pressure, and in fact it makes people less able to dream, to think outside the box.
Okay.
That's my personal observation.
Okay, your personal observation. So thank you very much for joining us anyway. Dr. Zhang Fan joining us from Beijing Normal University. Coming up, we will talk to a Hong Kong business leader regarding cooperation between Hong Kong and Hainan. This is World Today. Stay tuned.
Welcome. I am Chu Zhang, Deputy Director at the Center for Middle Eastern Studies at Fudan University. On the World Today program, we will dive beyond the headlines to uncover the stories, trends, and impacts that connect states across the globe. Join me on World Today.
You are listening to World Today. I'm Ding Hun in Beijing. A Hong Kong business leader is calling for a closer cooperation between Hong Kong and Hainan through what he describes as dual port linkage. Jonathan Choi Koon-shum, chairman of the Chinese General Chamber of Commerce in Hong Kong, says that after over a decade of attending the Boao Forum, he has witnessed the Hainan's remarkable transformation. Speaking with my colleague Song Ruixing on the sidelines of the event, Choi notes that Hainan's free trade port policies, including zero tariffs and low corporate taxes, are creating strong incentives for businesses. Let's take a listen.
Thank you for joining us, Dr. Choi. You are a long-time participant in the Boao Forum and have witnessed Hainan's transformation over the past few years, and especially since the launch of the Hainan Free Trade Port. What new signals about Hainan have you picked up at this year's forum?
I have joined the forum for almost 15 years, and every day is changing. This year is very special because it joined already the free port facility now. And I think the main signal that I get this time is Hainan would like to be a key player in trade and investment. They are working closely and will learn from Hong Kong and Singapore. And I feel that they would like to work closely with the RCEP and Hong Kong. And as a Hong Kong, there's so-called the dual port linkage. That is Hong Kong and Hainan. We will be working closely with them. And other than that, they are also very interested in AI development. As you know that AI plus is the future. That's why for this FTP, they would like to emphasize more on AI development in every aspects.
You serve as a political advisor in China, but you are also a seasoned entrepreneur. And from a business perspective, now that the Hainan Free Trade Port has entered full customers operation, what are the most compelling aspects of Hainan's innovation for traditional Asian enterprises that are feeling the pressure to transform?
I think for the traditional businessmen, the new opportunity, I would like to say, is the tariff. For example, it is FTP. Basically, most of the product imported into Hainan is tax zero. And another very interesting policy is if they import the raw material from other countries, if it is value added for 30%, if it's after the manufacturing and if it's shipped to mainland China, it is zero tax. This is, I think, is very attractive. And then for those who do the business in the Hainan, the corporate tax now is only 15%. All this attracted many traditional businessmen to look into Hainan Island. I think that is the opportunity here.
So for companies looking to take advantage of these policies, what are the biggest practical challenges you think?
For the challenges, I think first of all is the talent. If you want to do business here, you need the talent. And how to attract the talent is one thing. Secondly, is how to keep them to stay in Hainan Island. For the high talent, for example, is from the Western world. The living standard in Hainan is a bit different. They need high education. They need a better living environment. They need the visa-free and many facilities. And I think all this need to accommodate an ecosystem that their talent all over the world would like to keep them to stay here, to run the business, to make Hainan more prosperous.
So that's Hainan as a testing ground. And then let me bring Hong Kong into the big picture because it is currently, I'd say, repositioning itself right now. This year marks the beginning of China's 15th five-year plan. And Hong Kong has been actively aligning its development strategies with the national agenda. The city is formulating its first five-year development plan. So from your perspective as a leader in Hong Kong's business community, how should Hong Kong position itself during this 15th five-year plan period to maximize its unique strength?
It is the first time for Hong Kong to have own a five-year plan to align with the national 15th five-year plan. And as you know that, according to the five-year plan, we position more on, firstly, financial center, the shipping center, and the trade center. Other than that, a new thing is coming up is high technology center. And also is how to attract the talent to be into Hong Kong. This is basically our government's idea. Other than that, the 15th five-year plan also mentioned about the internationalization of renminbi. Therefore, this is a new ground that we can work with, especially the asset management and also the crisis management for the financial sector. And another point is on the legal profession. As you know that Hong Kong is very strong in the modern service industry, especially on the legal side. Therefore, on mediation, arbitration, and all this, the central government led Hong Kong to have the arbitration center in Hong Kong. And also recently, the mediation center is also already done in Hong Kong. And also the IB Trading Center is also mentioned in the 15th Five-Year Plan. And last but not least is the Hong Kong is a place for East meets West. Therefore, the cultural center is also positioned in Hong Kong to tell Hong Kong and China's story well. Under these circumstances, what Hong Kong can do, firstly, finance. Because finance, I think, is one of the most important sector in Hong Kong. Because IPO fundraising, we are number one in the world. For the fund management and asset management, we were number two. Very soon, we'll be the number one. And renminbi internationalization, I think this is the way that we are going to go. Secondly, technology. We are a technology hub. R&D is very strong in Hong Kong. Therefore, we have to work well with Shenzhen and the GPA, and then we will go abroad. Another thing that we have to do is, there's the so-called the Go Global Task Force suggested by the Hong Kong government. That is the new place that we can work with. Therefore, we bring together with the mainland enterprises to go abroad. That is another opportunity. But other than that, I can feel that we have to focus on the traditional, we are the super connector and super value adder for Hong Kong position. And as for businessmen, we feel that that's not all. I always emphasize on CIO. C means connector. We connect. But how do we have money? We invest. We co-invest with the mainland companies. Thirdly is O, is operator. We can operate the factories, operate facilities, and many more. Therefore, CIO is also a Hong Kong position. Therefore, we can do many things during the 15th Five-Year Plan.
So that is about Hong Kong's strategic positioning. But regionally saying, frameworks like RCEP are supposed to provide the broader structure for that. As someone who follows regional trade agreements closely, what do you see as the most underutilized opportunities within RCEP right now?
For the RCEP, it's a pity that Hong Kong is not included yet. But very soon, we hope, will be included in the RCEP. Once Hong Kong is included in the RCEP, I think we can fully utilize, firstly, the financial capability of Hong Kong. Because you know that Hong Kong is an international financial center. As I mentioned about IPO listing, fund management, renminbi internationalization, and many more. Therefore, financial sector is one thing that we can work well with them. Secondly, Hong Kong is very strong in R&D. Technology transfer is also very important. And Hong Kong is a trade center. Offshore trading, the biggest market, of course, is the U.S. In China, according to the Minister of Commerce, he said that China mainland plus Hong Kong is the biggest market for the world. Therefore, I can see that finance, technology, and also trade is very important for Hong Kong. Other than that is the service provider. We provide the service industry that I mentioned, the legal, the arbitration, accounting, and many more. That is we can bring to the RCEP in the future.
Okay, we have upcoming supply chain and new links. So if we look ahead, what do you see as the most promising breakthroughs for regional economic integration and sustainable cooperative development in Asia Pacific over the next few years?
In the next few years, I come from Hong Kong. Of course, we are the quite successful FDP. And Hainan also is a coming FDP. We should work together as a dual port linkage between Hainan and Hong Kong. Because Hong Kong is a matured FDP. We have been there for years and years. We are very mature. And Hainan is just coming up. And because of proximity and also many special facilities and policy there, we can cooperate together. For example, if they have investment, they have the new technology like the medical, like the digital advancement, Hong Kong financially can support them and also create market for them. Therefore, in the long run, I hope that Hainan can work with Hong Kong for the so-called the dual port linkage.
That was Dr. Jonathan Choi Koon-shum, chairman of the Chinese General Chamber of Commerce in Hong Kong, speaking with my colleague Song Ruixing. More to come. China protests to Japan over a break-in at the Chinese embassy in Tokyo. You're listening to World Today. I'm Ding Han in Beijing. We'll be back after a short break. You're back with World Today. I'm Ding Han in Beijing. China has launched a strong protest with Japan after a Japanese self-defense force officer broke into the Chinese embassy in Tokyo. The intruder scaled the embassy's wall and threatened Chinese diplomats. He identified himself as an active duty officer. Japanese police say the suspect has been arrested now. China has condemned this very incident as a grave violation of the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations and a threat to the safety of its personnel. China's foreign ministry is urging Japan to immediately conduct a thorough investigation, severely punish anyone that is involved, and provide a responsible explanation. So for more, joining us now on the line is Dr. Liu Kuangyu from the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. Thank you very much for joining us.
Hello, this is Guangyu.
So, probably the Japanese government could well argue that, okay, this intrusion is just an isolated case, etc., etc. But do you think it is relevant with the current trajectory of the bilateral relationship?
Yeah, absolutely. First, this incident is directly tied to the current trajectory of China and Japan relations. It's a part of the pattern that Japan's closer ties with the U.S. military expansion and recent provocations are all pushing the relations downward. And China has consistently warned against such acts, and this event deepens mutual suspicion at a time when both nations need cooperation on regional security, economic challenges. And I think it's not just a mistake. It's a signal of how tensions are escalating, and with trust already very low, this incident makes dialogue even harder. And behind this incident lies the growing anti-China sentiment within Japan society. Japan exercises actually extremely tight control over their media and public opinion. In its confrontation with China, the Takaichi cabinet has launched a massive anti-China propaganda campaign domestically, inciting the Japanese public to harbor hatred towards the Chinese government and their people. And this explains why this violence directed at the Chinese embassy. And China has, to a large extent, been portrayed by Takaichi as Japan's sole and greatest enemy. And also, this lone wolf style violent threat is a microcosm of the current anti-China xenophobic, far-right populist, and violent groups in Japan. We know that Takaichi cabinet is closely aligned with the Japan Innovation Party, which represents Japan's far-right forces. Yeah. They have very significant presence in organized crime and violent militant groups in regions such as Osaka in the Kansai era. So these groups are frequently, they incite unrest through xenophobic violence actions and targeting Chinese and other foreigners. So Takaichi's rise to power indicates that these forces are becoming part of Japan's political mainstream.
Yeah. According to some media reports, in an upcoming annual diplomatic report, Japan is going to downgrade its description of China ties from one of the country's most important. Instead, it is going to describe China as an important neighbor and the relationship with China as strategic and mutually beneficial. How would you look at this expected change in tone?
We see just as Takaichi returned from the U.S., Japan sent out this significant diplomatic signal, and this was, of course, no coincidence. It was undoubtedly something that Takaichi cabinet has been planning for some time. So first of all, what are the driving factors? I think that this adjustment, in essence, is a direct reflection of the recent series of frictions and confrontations of the bilateral relations, and therefore the Japanese government's revision of the wording in the Blue Book reflects its so-called reassessment of risks in current relationship with China, and marking a shift from the ambiguous balance of both competition and cooperation to a more realistic assessment that prioritizes security vigilance while downgrading economic and trade cooperation. And second, we see what's the shift in the wording signify. We know that diplomatic language in official documents often serve as a thermometer for policy direction. So on the one hand, it could be a tactical adjustment, which is a reactive response to China's countermeasures. And if so, there remains room for the wording to revert as government administrations change or circumstances evolve. And on the other hand, if this represents a fundamental shift in Japan's strategic assessment of China, with no longer viewing China as a partner for deep cooperation, but rather a geopolitical rival and neighbor requiring vigilance, and then I think the implication will be far more profound. And so, third, what will be the future implications? I think the practical impact of this symbolic adjustment in diplomatic language will gradually manifest in the political, economic, and security spheres. And the political and diplomatic, and also in the political and diplomatic spheres, this downgraded positioning may make high-level interaction and strategic communication between the two countries even more difficult. If Japan's mainstream they maintains the China-related provisions on the draft, and this could be viewed as a high-profile countermeasure by the Takaichi cabinet against China, and primarily against the projecting a tough stance towards China in the public eye and catering into right-wing forces. However, I don't think for a short time, actually, at least, it is very unlikely to have any substantial impact and should be viewed objectively and rationally.
Now, the Japan Times has actually recently published an op-ed titled, quote, "The West should learn from Japan how to stand up to China," unquote. And a central argument of this piece is that following China's responses to Sanai Takaichi's erroneous Taiwan remarks, Japan has not yielded to China's pressure, and this should be a model for countries like Canada, Australia, and Britain. They should abandon a so-called wishful thinking regarding pragmatic engagement with China. So briefly, Dr. Liu, how would you respond to comments like this?
Well, give me two feelings. First, Japan is now fully aware that its approach of unilaterally confronting China has left it highly isolated in the international community. We see the vast majority of countries, especially the U.S. so-called middle power allies, are unwilling to serve as pawns or sacrificial pieces in market strategy towards containing China. Only Japan is doing the opposite way. And second, Japan continues to distort the facts and turn black into white in the international era. We see they are attempting to portray itself as a so-called weak power, weak nation, resisting a great power, aggressor, and such a stand as a defender of the Western camp. So thereby, I think they're trying to elevate its strategic value and role in the eyes of U.S. and the West, and seeking to gain greater geopolitical influence.
Your point's well taken. But thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Liu Kuang-yu from Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. Coming up, the president of Ghana says the United States is normalizing erasure of Black history. This is World Today. We'll be back.
Hello, I am Dr. Digby James Wren, a political analyst and international relations scholar specializing in China area studies. World Today offers unmatched in-depth perspectives on China's politics, economics, business, technology, and society. World Today's team of reporters and contributors provides valuable information from all of the world's major economies. I hope you can join me on World Today for the very best insights and news from China, on China, and help to build a better understanding of China's role in the world today.
You're back with World Today. I'm Ding Hen in Beijing. Ghana's president has criticized the U.S. government for normalizing the erasure of Black history, warning such policies could generate a ripple effect elsewhere. John Dramani Mahama made a remark when he was addressing an event regarding slavery reparations at the United Nations. Mahama is in the New York City to table a resolution at the UN General Assembly to recognize the transatlantic slavery in history as the gravest crime in the history of the human society and calling for reparations. He has previously criticized the current U.S. leader for his claims of white genocide and land seizure in South Africa, calling them an insult to all Africans. So joining us now on the line is Harvey Zoldan, former vice president of ABC TV Network and a senior fellow with the Center for China and Globalization. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good to be with you.
So Ghana's president said that in the United States today, Black history courses are being taken away from school curricula. Institutions in the country are being mandated to stop teaching the truth of slavery, segregation, and racism. And the books that are intended to address those issues, those subjects, are increasingly being banned. What is your personal observation, Harvey?
My observation is that Ghana's president is completely correct. President Trump and many of his followers are racists. They're in the mold of South African whites during the apartheid era. It's really no surprise either that the person who gave Trump $290 million in the 2024 election campaign is South African-born Elon Musk, whose father was an extreme white supremacist. So as the saying goes, money talks and BS walks. So Trump has ordered the whitewashing at federal institutions like the Smithsonian and national parks to eliminate any discussions of America's racist past. That, by the way, it doesn't only affect Blacks, but Asians and other minorities. So we have the situation that in a number of red states, we've seen laws that ban books by Black authors, which deal with slavery, segregation, police violence, and the like, and which limit how teachers talk about systemic racism, white supremacy, and the legacy of slavery. In places like Trump's home state of Florida, that's meant blocking or even watering down African American studies courses and worse.
So do you believe, Harvey, that what is happening with regard to the U.S. domestic treatment of the Black history is going to generate a ripple effect elsewhere?
Absolutely. There are so many successful politicians and would-be politicians in the West that mimic Donald Trump on so many issues. So mark my word, Trump is opening a global Pandora's box of racism and hatred. And in a way, he's giving permission to the most extreme of them to go further than was acceptable in the pre-Trump era.
If the UN General Assembly adopts a resolution that recognizes the transatlantic slavery in history as the gravest crime in human history, do you think that's going to be helpful, realistically speaking, to some countries' efforts to seek reparations?
Well, first of all, as a Jew, I think that it's one of the gravest crimes, not necessarily the gravest. There, in the memory of many still alive today, there's the Holocaust and other genocides. But putting that aside, I don't think that this effort's going to be successful from a financial perspective. The EU and US have already said they will oppose the resolution, and others will as well. So, but even if there aren't financial reparations, there should at least be moral reparations, including condemnations and returning the cultural patrimony of looted treasures stolen by the West from African nations and elsewhere.
So, from today's perspective, why does recognition of slavery history matter? I mean, some people might question like this. Okay, that's the crime conducted by our ancestors, by the previous generations. Why should the current generation hold any responsibility for the crimes committed by our forefathers?
Yeah, well, I take your point, but it matters because, as we say about the Holocaust, never again. So we must teach about past human horrors so that they're never repeated. So I have to tell you that philosopher George Santayana said, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. We don't want this to be repeated ever, ever again.
I guess when we talk about this very serious issue, it has a lot to do with international fairness and justice. And today we're talking about a particular piece of comment from a leader from the global south or from African country. From China's perspective, what do you think the Chinese government can do to help advance their cause of seeking justice and fairness?
I think that China should stand up in the UN and in other multilateral bodies for fairness against things like apartheid, against injustices that have been going on and that are currently going on. So your foreign minister always likes to say that China is on the right side of history.
Yeah.
And I believe China should continue to be on the right side of history and to call out things that deserve to be called out.
Very briefly, the final question. If you take a look at China's official responses, official statements to, say, the ongoing war in Iran, do you think China's actual mindset is consistent with China's official words or China's responses to these global hotspot issues?
Absolutely. And I think if you look at Chinese history, China has a history as a peaceful country and of promoting peace. And so I believe in the current era where China is so powerful, it's using its power to be on the right side of history, to call out these abuses, and to push other countries to do what's right. China is a moral beacon now to many countries in the world that the United States used to be, but isn't anymore.
Okay. Thank you very much for joining us and for your analysis. Harvey Zolden, former vice president of ABC TV Network and a senior fellow of the Center for China and Globalization. Coming up, Unitree Robotics is riding on the humanoid tide as the Hangzhou-based Chinese company targets $610 million IPO. This is World Today. Stay tuned.
Welcome. I'm Elaf Ellard, economics professor and member of the Data Science and AI Center at New York University, Shanghai. On the World Today program, you can find in-depth and impartial insight, as well as critical commentary on key trends in the Chinese economy, financial technology, business, and blockchain. To prepare for the world tomorrow, join me on World Today.
You're listening to World Today. I'm Ding Hen in Beijing. China's humanoid robots are stepping out of the lab and into the spotlight, and now into the capital markets as well. Startup Unitree Robotics has filed for an initial public offering application on the Shanghai Stock Exchange, looking to raise more than $610 million. This could end up becoming one of the country's largest tech listings in recent years. And this particular company we're talking about here grabbed national attention when its humanoid robots performed martial arts at the annual Chinese Spring Festival Gala. The company's operating income grew by 330% year-on-year in 2025, while its net profit soared by more than 600%. So for more on this, my colleague Zhao Yang spoke with Dr. Yan Liang, professor of economics with Willamette University.
Yeah, so Unitree Robotics has filed for an IPO application on the Shanghai Stock Exchange. Why is it now, and what does this move mean for the company?
Well, I think the timing is right for Unitree. As we know, this is a relatively young company that was founded in 2016, and it started to turn its first profit in 2024. And last year, its adjusted net profits surged by 6 times from a year earlier to reach 600 million yuan. So the company is ready, so to speak, to be publicly listed. And the gross margin on its main business has climbed very steadily, approaching 60% in 2025. And so humanoid robots carry the highest even higher margins than this. So in a way, I think the company is mature enough to make enough profits to be listed. And I think this also, in a way, take advantage of the broader trend, which is the humanoid robots industry is taking off and quickly scaling up in China. And so that means it will attract a lot of investments into this market. And as we know, the company is aiming for just over $2.4 billion of funding. But I think many of the analysts and market observers expect a post-IPO valuation north of 100 billion yuan. So in other words, this is going to be a very attractive opportunities for investors to invest in the humanoids industry.
And what does it mean for the development of China's humanoid robotics industry, do you think?
Well, I think this just shows there's a lot of investment, there's a lot of enthusiasm for investors to go into this sector. We know that most of the tech giants, for example, Tencent, Alibaba, Ant Group, Xiaomi, ByteDance, have all invested directly or indirectly in Unitree. So I think that this just showcases that, again, as the industry is developing, right, when it comes to both technological development, but also in terms of industrial scaling up, when it comes to production scales and in terms to cost effectiveness, I think there will be a lot more market opportunities to adopt this technology in various industries. So that means the monetization opportunity is high. And so that's why I think that it just shows that many of the opportunities exist and there will be more investments into the sector. And so I think that just showcase, that the company itself is ready, but it's also just showing that this is a trend for the overall industry and for the market conditions.
And in China's push towards advanced manufacturing and AI plus integration, Yan, where will the humanoid robots and embodied AI create the most immediate value? On factory floors, in services sectors, or in some entirely new application scenarios?
Right. So we know for the moment, 70% of the humanoids robots sales from Unitree are still mostly going into research, education, and other related sectors. But that said, I think there is a rising, scaling up trend in China to adopt the humanoids robots, giving, its technological maturity and giving the rising user cases for this kinds of technology. So for example, in manufacturing and assembly, humanoids are being deployed now for assembly, part handling, and also quality inspections in automotive and also in the so-called 3C, the computer, communication, and consumer electronics factories. So they're being utilized for those repetitive, high precision, or dangerous tasks. So I think the manufacturing user case is rising. In addition to that, there's also user cases in, for example, logistics and warehousing. So this means, for example, material transport, sorting, and warehouse handling. These kinds of tasks are really suitable for these kind of human robots. In addition to that, I think there's also user cases in service industries as well as in retail industries. So humanoid robots are being utilized as receptionist robots or ticket distributors in various, service centers and pop-up stores. And finally, I think there are other emerging sectors, such as industrial inspections, including, for example, the all-weather models like the deep robotics DRO2. They're being used to inspect hazardous environments, navigating, extreme temperatures, and so on and so forth. And also in the healthcare industry, I think now we're seeing the emerging uses for elderly care, for emergency rescue, and other specialized non-public safety security roles. So in a way, I think as these technologies become more and more developed, and as the production scale increases and cost goes down, I do see that there are more and more potential user cases being created in the market.
And China is now pushing humanoid robots and embodied AI alongside the quantum computing and 6G. So how central is humanoid robots industry to the long-term economic strategy?
Well, I think it is very important future industry, right? This is part of the embodied AI, where I think these robots are not only being dexterous, right, using all these limbs and the motion and to be able to perform a lot of repetitive tasks, But more and more, I think the intelligence in terms of AI is being diffused into these robots. In other words, these robots are not only advanced in terms of motor control, which is Unitree is really developing very rapidly, but they're also developing quote unquote the brains. So in other words, they're able to navigate through various scenarios and come up with autonomous reactions in those scenarios. So I think that's why these robots are, have great potentials. They can be integrated in the industry sector. And right now, I think in terms of labor shortages that China is going to face in the medium and long term, these human robots will be a great help to amend that, labor shortages. And also giving, China's industrial supply chain that many of these robots in terms of their technological development and production can be in-housed. And that would improve, the production scale and at a very cost-effective way. So I think all of this shows that these robots will be greatly beneficial for various industries. As we know that, these robots can be employed in the industrial sector, the service sector, as well as in the agricultural sector. So I think that given that this is all purpose, given that it is helping to, make up for the labor shortages, and given that they can help to promote productivity, I do see that this is being a very important pillar industry going forward in China's development.
And for global robotics companies, how does Unitree Robotics compare with other players like Tesla or Boston Dynamics?
Well, I think, Boston Dynamics and others, they are really strong competitors. They especially have advantages when it comes to software. So their performance are usually considered as stable and also polished. But that said, I think Unitree has its own advantages. As I mentioned earlier, when it comes to motor control, Unitree is really advanced. It is lightweight also. It is also to be able to scale up quickly and also made very cost effective. As a matter of fact, when you look at the humanoid robots, Unitree's cost has declined by over 70% from 2023 to today. So in other words, these kinds of high volume production and low cost and relatively reliable performance will enable this technology to be widely adopted in various scenarios. I think right now Unitree is working very hard in terms of improving its quote unquote intelligence or its brain of these robots, again, to allow these robots to better understand the physical environments and also to plan their tasks more autonomously. So I think in terms of this sort of humanoid robot race, it is very fierce. The competition is very high. But I also think that China's robots definitely has its own advantages, but not only take advantage of the technology development, but really in terms of its robust supply chain, its large manufacturing capacity, and the low cost. And so I think that would really help to boost this industry. So again, for Unitree itself, for example, its investment plan now target an annual production of 75,000 humanoids robots and also 115,000 quadrupeds within 5 years. And I think that would again help this humanoid robots to be really widely used. And so that would, I think, promote both Unitree and also humanoids industry's development in China.
Dr. Yan Liang, Professor of Economics, was Willamette University, speaking with my colleague Zhao Yang. That's all the time for this edition of World Today. Bye for now.